I want to welcome all of you, all of our campuses watching via video, those of you watching at Church Online, to the fourth and final week of a series we've been in called At the Movies. Hadn't this been just an incredible series so far? Have you guys enjoyed this series? Yeah, it's been a cool series. And this week we're going to be talking about the movie The Martian. Before we kind of jump into what we're talking about today, I just want to ask a question to all of our campuses. How many of you have ever been lost? Like you've been lost. Now, I'm not talking about like you made a wrong turn, you got on your GPS, I'm talking about, oh my dang, I'm lost, right? Like how many of you have ever been that kind of lost? A few years ago, when I was living in St. Louis, we went deer hunting at this place in this forest called the Shawnee National Forest. And we had a great hunt in the morning. This was my first time to go with this group of guys to the Shawnee National Forest. I didn't really know my way around. And so we had a great morning hunt. We went and ate lunch. We went back in the afternoon. And I began to sit in my stand, and I was tracking this deer. He was kind of too far to shoot, but I was tracking this deer. And the sun began to set. And for those of you that aren't hunters, you're not supposed to hunt when it gets dark. So I got out of my stand, and by the time I got out of my stand, it was completely pitch black dark. But being a guy, right, like I know where I'm going. I've never been to the woods, but I know where I'm going. When I got out of my stand, it was pitch black dark. And what was supposed to take me about 15 to 20 minutes to get me back to camp where we were staying, I realized that about 25 to 30 minutes into my walk back that I was lost. Like, oh no, lost. Like, I'm probably going to be spending the night in the woods, lost. And I remember thinking, like you begin to think like worst case scenario, right? Like, I mean, the wind blows and you hear the leaves and you're like, you like freak out, right? You hear all the animals moving around behind you and you're like freaking out. You're thinking one of these things is going to eat me at any given moment. And you just freak out. Like it was a bad deal. And about 2.5 hours into my trek back to camp, I start to see flashlights and hear four-wheelers. And I had never been so thankful in my entire life to see four-wheelers and flashlights. And so my guys that I was hunting with realized that either this dude's asleep in the stand, he's been eaten by an animal, or he's lost. And they begin this rescue mission to come find me. And they're searching through the woods, screaming my name here, and like I am freaking out because my phone doesn't work, and I'm lost. And as I watched this movie, The Martian, that story came to my mind. Because you see, Mark Watney was left on Mars because they thought he was dead. And when the crew found out that he was alive, they went on a rescue mission, right? Like they went to find and to get Mark Watney to make sure that he comes home. And there's a passage in the Bible, Luke chapter 15, where Jesus is telling some parables, where he's telling some stories about a rescue mission and about people and things that are lost. And so if you have a Bible, I want you to turn to Luke chapter 15. We're going to start in verse 1, but Luke chapter 15. If you don't have a Bible, we'd love to give you one on your way out, a free New Testament Bible in an easy-to-read translation at all of our campuses. You can just pick one of those up on your way out. But if you have a Bible or a smartphone, turn to Luke chapter 15, and we're going to start in verse 1. Luke 15, verse 1. It says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people. He was even eating with them. You see right here in this text, you see that Jesus is hanging out with sinners, that he was a friend of sinners. He pursued people who were far from God. He was interested in them, hanging out with them, even eating with them. And the church people, the religious leaders and the Pharisees, they were making fun of him. They were like, what are you doing, dude? Look at him. He's hanging out with sinners. He's hanging out with people who aren't like us. What's he doing? And this text is encouraging to me. I mean, can you imagine that being the worst thing that somebody said about you? That you were a friend of sinners? And this is encouraging to me because in this passage we see that Jesus is a friend of sinners. And I'm so thankful for that, because if he wasn't, then I would never have the opportunity to be his friend, and neither would you. And so he's hanging out with these people. He's passionate about these people. He's pursuing these people. And so I'm sure he makes fun or kind of blows off the religious leaders who are making fun of him. And then he goes on to tell this story in verse 3. He says, so Jesus told him the story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Now, I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, just let it go, right? He's got 99 other sheep. And we know sheep are dumb, right? Sheep are the dumbest animal alive. If you throw a stick and say fetch, it's just going to look at you. Like, sheep are dumb. So we're probably thinking, just let it go. Just let it walk, all right? It's no big deal. But check out what he says. He says, won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. And when he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep. And in the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. And he goes on and tells another story in verse 8. He says, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one of them. Again, this isn't like dimes, nickels, and quarters here, right? I mean, you guys are probably thinking like when dad comes home, sits in the recliner, pulls a handle, and all the change falls out, right? It's not that big a deal. Like, this is a big deal. This is worth like $100, like in this day and age. And check out, he continues and says, won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she will call in her friends and neighbors and say, rejoice with me, because I have found my lost coin. In verse 10, it says, in the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. You see, I think if we're going to really understand what God's talking about in this text, there's 4 things that we have to know. And there's 4 things that we have to grasp. There's 4 things that we have to wrap our minds around. And the first one is this, is we've got to see what God sees. We have to look through the lenses of God. We've got to see what God sees. We've got to look at people like God does. You see, we like to categorize people, right? Like, maybe they talk a different way than we do. Maybe they live in a different place. Maybe they do something different than we do. Maybe they don't look like we do. And we begin to categorize people. I remember when I was in high school, we had all kinds of categories for people. Like, we had the skater dudes, right, who had long hair, wore the skinny jeans, had the skateboard in their hand. The skater dudes later came on to be worship leaders, right? Like, we categorized people. You had the jocks, the guys that were real big or thought they were real big, walk around school like they were better than everybody else, right? I unfortunately was one of those people. You had the nerds, the geeks. Like, we begin to categorize people, and we still do that today. Like, how many of you are morning people? Like, you'd say, man, morning is my time. I love morning. All of our campuses, morning people, raise your hand. Yeah. And then there's another group of you who want to punch the people that just raised their hand, right? Yeah. We categorize people. We do. But if we're going to begin to see what God sees, there's really only 2 categories that matter. Saved and lost. Saved meaning people have committed their life to Christ, meaning they have a relationship with Jesus, meaning they're pursuing Him, meaning they're going to spend an eternity in a place called heaven. Or lost. They've never committed their life to Christ. They've never been forgiven of their sin. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. And they're going to spend an eternity in a place called hell. There's only 2 categories that matter if we're going to see what God sees. And here's the deal. When you go and you eat lunch with your people today, whether it be at a restaurant or around your table at your house, you're going to lock eyes with people, and there's really only going to be 2 categories that matter. 2 categories that matter. When you go to work tomorrow and you're in that office area or you're doing work with the people around you, there's 2 categories that matter when we begin to see what God sees. The second thing that we need to know is we've got to feel what God feels. We've got to feel what God feels. We've got to feel the weight that God feels. How many of you have ever lost something valuable to you? Like you've lost something valuable, like your phone. Have you ever seen somebody that's like attached to their phone, then they lose it? Like it's a bad deal, right? Or your wallet. You ever lost a wallet? Like that's bad. That's the worst feeling ever. I feel naked when I don't have my wallet or don't know where it's at. Or a kid. You ever lost a kid? Yeah. Those of you that are making fun of me for losing a kid, you've never had a kid, okay? Those things are like ninjas, all right? They're here 1 second and they're gone the next, all right? I remember we were here at our Southwest campus one weekend, and we were in between gatherings. And my wife comes up to me and she's like freaking out a little bit. She's got Camden, my son, in her arms, and she's already checked the kids out of the e-kids area, and she says, I can't find Adeline. I'm like, what do you mean you can't find Adeline? Did you check them out of the e-kids? Is she still in her classroom? Yeah, I've got them already. I can't find her. And so I'm like, she's probably just talking to us. I mean, she's a social butterfly. She's probably out there talking to one of our first-time guests, just telling them everything about it, right? Like, I mean, she's probably just talking to somebody. But I begin to scan the lobby, and I don't see her anywhere. Like I don't see her, and I'm starting to get real panicky. So I walk down the e-kids rooms and in the nursery and in the offices. I can't find her. And I begin to freak out. Like, we have another gathering in about 5 to 10 minutes, okay? And I'm sitting here thinking, we'll just cancel church because I've got to find my daughter, right? And everything around me just stopped. And I went on a full-on pursuit of my daughter. And I didn't care what was going on around me, because my mind began to go worst case scenario, right? Like, oh my gosh. And to find out she was hanging out underneath one of these tents that we have in the e-kids room. And I found her and I was like, what are you doing? I was just tired and I needed to lay down, Daddy. You didn't think to tell me like that wasn't a big deal? I mean, I know all of your kids listen to you. Sometimes mine don't, okay? And she just disappeared and wandered off. But in that moment, man, I was freaking out. I was scared to death. And everything around me stopped. And I think the same is true with God. Is that He knew that without Jesus, we were lost. We were going to spend an eternity in hell. And He loved you and I so much that everything around Him stopped. And He said, I'm going to send my one and only Son, Jesus, for you and for me. And we've got to begin to feel what God feels, the weight of that. Because you see, when we're in a relationship with somebody, we begin to feel what they feel. We begin to be passionate about the things that they're passionate about. We begin to be interested in the things that they're interested in. You know how I know this? Because up until about 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about, nor did I care about Disney princesses. I didn't. But I can tell you now about Rapunzel, about Ariel, about Anna, about Elsa, about Cinderella, and the list just goes on. I can tell you about Disney princesses. I'm interested in Disney princesses, okay? I'm a grown man, and I'm interested in them. You know why? Because my sweet little 3-year-old Adeline loves them. And I love her with everything that I have. And I'm interested in the things that she's interested in. You see, when we're in a relationship with Jesus, we've got to care about the things that He cares about. We've got to be passionate about the things that He's passionate about. We have to feel what He feels. The third thing is this: we've got to do what God says. We've got to do what God says. I mean, look at the people that He was hanging out with. He was hanging out with people who were far from God. He was a friend of sinners. We've got to do that. You know, it's good to have community, to hang out with people here at church or in our life transformation groups. It's good to have community. But we need to be friends of sinners, people who are far from God. We need to be passionate about that. I mean, think about the crew when they found out that Mark Watney was still alive. They had some options, all right? They were on their way back home. And they had an option to keep going home and to see their family in a few months and to have little risk going home. But when they found out that Mark Watney was still on Mars, that he was alive, they had they could say, you know what? Sorry about you, dude. That's just one person. I mean, no big deal. I'm going to be home with my family soon. And they could have kept on going home. But you know what? They didn't. They counted the cost. And they said, it's worth the risk. And everything around them stopped. And they went on full-on pursuit of Mark Watney. We've got to do what God says. Number 4, we have to celebrate like God celebrates. We've got to celebrate like God celebrates. You know, I was thinking about celebration this week, and that we're really, really good at celebrating the temporary. Like we're real good at celebrating the temporary. I went to the Tech football game this past week, and every time we would score, the Jones went nuts. Tortillas flying everywhere. Like it was crazy. It was a celebration. When the Cowboys win, I mean, the whole state of Texas is going nuts. It's a celebration. Because we don't get to experience it that often, I know. But it's a celebration, right? It's a celebration. But here's the deal. Next September, they start all over again. And none of that matters. It doesn't matter. I'm not telling you that you should go to a football game and just stand there like, this is the most miserable thing I've ever been to in my life. But we've got to get to the place that we celebrate like God celebrates. Look what it says in Luke chapter 15, verse 10. It says, in the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. It's a celebration. They get excited about that. Here's the thing. I'm excited about heaven, okay? I'm pumped about heaven. I'm excited about it because this is not my home. I've committed my life to Christ. I know for a fact that this is not my home. And I'm excited about heaven. You know why? Because I'm going to get to see friends and loved ones who have gone on before me, who have committed their life to Jesus, who are no longer going to be sick, no longer going to be in pain. I'm excited about that. But you know the thing that I'm most excited about? Heaven. It's what it says in Revelation chapter 7. It says, after this, I saw a vast crowd, too great to count. There's going to be a lot of people there. From every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. And they were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands. And they were shouting with a great roar. It was a celebration. Salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb. You see, that's a party. That's a celebration. That's the kind of celebration that I want to be a part of. And I want as many people there with me as possible. I want as many people there with me as possible. So maybe there's some of you here today at all of our campuses. You say, I want to be a part of that kind of celebration. I want to be in that party. How do I get to be invited to that party? Romans chapter 10, verse 9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You will be a part of the celebration. You will be a part of the party. But we've got to get to that place to where we acknowledge that we're sinners, that we're lost, that we're lost. and without committing our life to Jesus, without acknowledging the fact that Jesus died for us, that we're going to spend an eternity in a place called hell. But God sent his one and only Son, Jesus, for me and for you, so that we can be a part of the celebration. You see, it's impossible to say that we love Jesus and not care about the things that he cares about. It's impossible. Jesus came to be a friend of sinners. And I'm so thankful for that. And that we might get a chance to know him and be a part of the greatest rescue mission of all time. Listen, there's a celebration and there's a party. And I want as many people there with me as possible. Let's pray. God, I'm so thankful that you thought about me, a sinner. God, that you sent your one and only Son, Jesus, to die for me and my friends. So God, I pray for that person that's here today who knows for a fact that they're not a part of the party. They're not a part of the celebration. They've never committed their life to you. God, today would be that day. And they can walk out of this place knowing that their eternity is secure. And they can be a part of the party. And God, for those of us that have committed our life to Christ, God, I pray that you constantly remind us that it's impossible to love you, to pursue you, to say that we're passionate about you and not care about the things that you care about. And so God, help us. Please remind us that you've tasked us with the greatest rescue mission of all time. And there's going to be a celebration of every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every language. And God, I want as many people there as possible. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for checking out one of our messages today. For more information about our church or to watch other messages, you can go to our website at experiencelife.now.com. Let us know if we can serve you in any way, and we hope to see you real soon.